So based on our diagrams here, we're going to write some create table statements, and we're going to look at what the new syntax would look like for that. So I have a 2U uh, 2U database that I created. If you want to create your own database at home, you won't be able to do this in the school, but if you're at home and running on your local server, you just right-click on databases. Yes, you right-click on databases, not on the server, and you select new database, and you type in a database name. I chose to name it 2U because I don't want to be in trouble for any kind of copyright infringement or anything of that nature. But anyway, I have no tables in this database so far. I'm going to create some new tables. So let's create the account table the same way that we always do. I'm going to just quickly do this and pause the video, and I'll be right back. Okay, so just a quick snapshot of what I've done for the create table account table. This should be pretty familiar because we've done this dozens of times. I've already run this table once, so I'm going to just get rid of that squiggly line there. Now, next I'm going to pause and do the same for most of the video table so we can focus on how this foreign key thing works. So pause the video here if you're trying to copy this down because I'm about to skip right to the next table. Okay, so I've got most of it done. So far this should look pretty familiar. I've created an ID field and I've added the identity specification. We discussed what not null is really briefly. It just means that I'm not allowed to create a video record that doesn't have a title. I have to have something other than null in that field. And in the case of default here, it just automatically fills in this post date with the current time at the time that the record is created. I didn't put nulls and defaults on the other columns to avoid too much noise because that's not the focus right now. What is the focus is how to handle this particular field right here. How do we deal with this foreign key? We'll discuss how to figure out what the foreign key is soon enough. For now, when you're dealing with a foreign key, there's a little bit of syntax and things that we follow to make sure that our foreign key works. So we've got a video ID here that's a primary key. We notice that we put a little bit of kind of language here with the video ID, and then we also need to put the constraint here. We've created all these other columns and we didn't have to put constraints on them, although not null is a constraint in itself. But we kind of just let them go. Why the primary key? Well, because we wanted the database to enforce that we have to have a unique ID in each record for that particular field. Well, in the case of the foreign key, we still need to have a record, or sorry, a column. And we don't want it to ever be null. Foreign keys, until we're doing recursive relationships, we mostly will never want them to be null. And at least for this term, you can assume that foreign keys you will not want to be null except in recursive relationships. And that we don't discuss until after the break. But in addition to our account ID column being here, notice I didn't put identity on it because you can only have identity on one field in your entire table and it should be your primary key. Okay. But it's not really a foreign key until you put a foreign key constraint on it. Now you notice early in the term I said that our constraints are going to start with a little bit of a prefix indicating what type of constraint it is. This is a primary key, so it starts with PK. And then our second part is going to list the table that the key belongs to. So video. Same thing with foreign key, fk underscore video. But this third part is going to be different depending on the constraint you're using. And in the case of foreign key, what we do is this third part mentions the other table that the foreign key references. So it's going to be account in this case. Now we're creating a foreign key. So far this looks pretty much like a pattern. ACCID. All right, so we're saying it's a foreign key. But if I try to run this as is, I'll get an error. It says incorrect syntax near bracket. And then if I look, I've got a little red squiggly line right here. And that squiggly line tells me that something probably before or after this bracket is wrong? Well, I know I've got my semicolon there. I know it's supposed to be there. And the bracket is supposed to be there surrounding all of this stuff in between the opening bracket and the end bracket. So it's probably something just before that bracket. And if I backtrack, it's right here, foreign key. All right. Now we have to learn the next part of our foreign key constraint, and it looks like this. I'm just going to kind of pull this open a little bit more. Looks like this. We add in the keyword references. All right. Then we say which table it references, and we say ACC ID. Now, why do we have to mention the table that we reference and the column name again? Well, first of all, this is just a naming convention. If I wanted to, I could put in, well, maybe I can't put in I could put in anything I want, just random text. The whole thing could be random text, all right? I don't want to. The naming convention is there to make my life easier as a programmer, but the naming convention is not assumed to be there by SQL, and SQL can't kind of decode what that naming convention means. That's entirely for human use. The other thing is this ACC ID, it feels like we're repeating it. Well, we happen to be using the same field name as our account table. But if this was named, for example, ACCT ID, you'll notice that this here gets a red underline and this here does not. That's because this particular set of brackets says that the field in this table named ACCT ID is the foreign key field. But this here, this refers to the primary key that we want our foreign key to reference, hence the word references and the indication of both the table and the column that we want it to belong to.